Hi, everyone. This is our fifth annual Beginning Again retreat. Thanks to everyone who's joined us today live. We are also recording, so if you're watching the archive, thank you so much for watching. We're going to go through a series of workshops over the next 3 hours. Each workshop is 25 minutes. We want this to be helpful and valuable for you, so feel free to post questions in the chat room and comments and insights that you gain. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off with a presentation on one word writing for comfort. And I think that this is an interesting experience that I actually do myself. And so I wanted to share it with you to see what would you think about taking a word and then writing just about that word. I thought it would be helpful for us first to think through why write? And I want you to know that I believe everyone is a writer. So you might think, oh, I don't write. I believe everyone is a writer. And here are some reasons that writing can help us, especially when we're grieving. So we can express ourselves when we write in a way that we might not be able to do when we're speaking with someone or sharing with someone because we worry that they won't get it or they'll judge how we're feeling. Our pen and paper never judges, they just receive. It also can help us with insights about what has happened. And I think particularly when you're in a life after caregiving ends, you have time to reflect back on what has happened. And sometimes during that reflection, you think, wait, what? How did I manage that? What was that about? And you can write it. You could write it in a way that it feels like a play, a novel, a short story. We're going to talk about 6-word stories in just a minute. But isn't that interesting to think about? A situation that already happened, that you're trying to understand what was that, to write it as a play. You don't even have to name who the cast of characters in real life were. You could change their names and then create a dialogue about it. And then it might help you to really gain some insights from different perspectives. You could write that story from the perspective of each of the cast of characters. So you could have 5 versions, for instance, of a story. And that helps you figure out what's the real story. And it can help us with stress. I think that's so interesting. Expressive writing can help us with our blood pressure and our immune function. So just writing it out. And I do think that there's something that's helpful if you like to write on pen and paper. They always say that writing with pen and paper is particularly powerful. Okay, and so I would love to say that I have no idea what this is, but I ruminate. Oh my gosh, the rumination. Oh gosh, and I would prefer not to ruminate. I would like to not visit again over and over. Difficulties, stressful situations, unhappy moments. Moments when I felt like, wow, I really was not at my best. And so if we write it out, we can release it so we don't have to continuously think about it. And it can help us with our sleep about that. So we don't take it to bed with us. We've released it before we go to bed. And then it just helps us understand ourselves. And all the reasons that it does that are just the reasons that I shared. And it can help us understand what is a trigger for us for certain behavior. Like it could be a trigger for what makes you mad, and you have an insight about what makes you mad because you've written about it. In particular, writing goals on paper is really powerful. If you have a goal, write it down. I'm not sure exactly what happens, but there's something that happens when you write it down. So for me, I needed inspiration in order to figure out what to write about. I like words. I like to look at words. I like to think about what words mean in different situations and to different people. So for me, I needed a prompt, and I looked for prompts from one word. So I would pay attention, for instance, to current events. And if there was a word that stood out in press coverage or in what someone was sharing, like on a news show, that word would stick with me. And I would think, huh, how could that apply personally to me if I took that one word? There were emotions that I would feel, and I would think, what if I wrote about that particular emotion? If I were out and I saw something that was interesting, I would think of one word to describe what I just saw. And then experiences and particularly frustrations became really helpful inspirations. So I would take one word and then write about it. And then I figured out, actually, because I started doing it in 2003, so I've been doing it a little over 20 years, I started thinking through, well, what was the process that I created? And anytime I wrote about one word, I did follow a process. So I described the word as it related to my reality. I applied that meaning to what I am experiencing or I had experienced. And then I thought about applying that word to my reality led me to feel a certain way. How did I feel? And what were the challenges that I experienced because of that word? And then I thought, well, I don't want to stay in the frustration and challenges. I want to go somewhere better. So I described the other side of the word and I looked for a different perspective, a belief, or something I could wish for myself for my future. So I described my reality and then I looked at the other side to figure out what could I think or believe or wish that could help me feel better. So I have a couple suggestions for you that I've written. I'm just going to share them with you, and I'll share my screen so you can follow along. So Taylor Swift has been in the news for a long time, and I thought, what if I took that word Swift and tried to apply it to a caregiving situation? So you could do the same thing. You could take Swift and look back on your caregiving experience and think, how does that apply for me? So this is what I figured out it applied for me. So again, the one word is Swift. And I had been listening to Taylor Swift's songs when I wrote this, so you'll notice that I refer to some of her songs as I wrote this. So here we go. You know all too well how the swiftness of a caregiving day can leave you breathless. You try so hard to be in concert with the schedule, the needs, the tasks, the deadlines, but they all play a different instrument to a different beat, which means you simply feel out of tune with the day's rhythm. You sometimes feel like you can't breathe because of all the demands. Other times you can feel like your day is like starring in a movie. You can't believe this is your reality, except you can't pick the role you play, and you receive your script after you need it. You want what's best for others, but they seem to label you the anti-hero, which leads you to scream inside your head, don't blame me. You would love to shake it off, leave the frustrations and resentments behind, but you find yourself just stuck in bad blood. Throughout your moments and seasons, at daylight, in August, and in December, you just wish you could start over with the baggage, without the baggage, with just a blank space. Each day feels like a year. Each year feels like eras. Caregiving can feel like wearing a red cardigan when outside temperatures are 90 degrees, turning what could have been a good day into a cruel summer. How do you tailor a day that works with and for you? Decide your day can be a love story to yourself. Give yourself time to sing the songs that warm your heart and lift your soul. Allow yourself a chance to be enchanted with the idea that this style of your life will inspire you to create something beautiful that will be a comfort to others. Be kind, generous, and gracious with yourself. You'll create the karma you deserve. So I did write that after my caregiving experience had ended, just reflecting back on everything that had happened and thinking through how could I be kinder to myself about what I experienced? And so that helped me look to being kind, gracious, and generous. And then here's another one that I did write in the middle of caregiving. And again, you can use these prompts to look back at what happened during caregiving, to write about that moment that still stays with you. So here's the next one. Swallow. Some days I think I will be swallowed by caregiving, swallowed by the pressing need to be available when caregiving needs me, regardless of the hour, my plans, my energy level. Swallowed by the weight of the responsibility to have the right answers and solutions and supplies on a moment's notice. Swallowed by the sadness as I watch my parents struggle to keep up, to hang on, to continue. And yet I can't wallow in the swallow. So that was my shift. I can swallow back my fear. I am strong enough. I can swallow back my doubts. I am wise enough. I can swallow back my worries. I am brave enough. I can breathe in gratitude for the opportunity to be present during my parents' most vulnerable hours. I can breathe in gratitude for the chance to learn and grow and get better. I can breathe in gratitude to be a part of one of life's most important experiences. I can breathe. So swallow went to breathe. I couldn't swallow, and now I can breathe. And then here's the last one, which is cry. You've had a long night, which means you're having a really long day. You want to cope. Really, you're just moments away from a good cry. It's so frustrating when you can't sleep. It's awful that you are regularly robbed of rest. Of course, you want to cry. You're crying for what you've lost, what you have to endure, and what you face. It's okay to cry. Rather than using your energy to hold back the tears, release what hurts with a good cry. After the cry, know we want you to gain better days. Enjoy rather than endure, and be happy rather than dread. We hope your next cry is from tears of joy. That's the kind of cry you deserve. And cry actually came from bad night because my upstairs neighbors are really loud. And that was just a few months ago. So you could use all kinds of experiences to start your one-word writing. So let's practice with 6-word stories. So I'm going to give you a prompt for words, and you can pick one. Or if you have a different word, go ahead and write about that. And then write a 6-word story about your right now perspective. And then you're going to write a second 6-word story connecting to a better belief. Your 6-word stories could include hyphens. So you might have 10 words, hyphenating 3, and that will get you 6. Or you could hyphenate 4 words, and that will get you 6. So hyphens are allowed in order to stretch out your story if you feel like 6 words isn't enough. So here's what I wrote. I dread another death. And then I flipped it. I welcome being of service again. I lose faith for better days. And then I flipped it. I hold faith to keep better days. Okay, so here's our prompt. So we use these wheels in our training programs, and you'll see me use them a few more times today. So I would love for you to pick a word and then write a 6-word story about that word, and then flip it to get a better perspective. And as you write, you are welcome to share what you write in the chat room. The dread about the next death was something I was really feeling in late spring and early summer. And then we had another death in my family. My sister-in-law died. I think we have a tendency to minimize what we dread. I think sometimes what we dread is what we're feeling may happen. We're not making it up. We're not making it up. So as you think about your 6-word stories, feel free to share them in the chat room. And one of the reasons that I like to do this 1-word writing is because I like to write about the reality. Because I do think sometimes people have a tendency to say, oh, it's not that bad. It'll be better tomorrow. Honestly, sometimes it's not going to be better tomorrow. And you guys know that. You've been through experiences where you feel like, you know what? I know it's going to be worse tomorrow because I know what tomorrow includes. And in particular, after caregiving ends, if we feel like we have all this time and space in front of us, which is what we crave during caregiving, but after caregiving, it can feel so overwhelming. It's so intense, and you might think, oh, tomorrow I'm going to wake up to space and time, and I'm not sure what to do with it because it's intimidating for me. So you could write a 6-word story about space. And it could be around space in your calendar, because after caregiving ends, you've cleared the calendar of your caregiving responsibilities. That's a huge shift. And a lot happens when you clear the calendar. It could be space in your rooms. So equipment and supplies are gone, and now you're looking at a room that looks different. I think it's so jarring when they pick up, for instance, the hospital bed and other equipment, and you think, oh gosh, that space, it's so empty. You might feel space in relationships because you might feel disconnected. I still sometimes feel disconnected from my siblings, and sometimes it feels more since caregiving has ended. I think oftentimes we have a glue that keeps us in relationship, and our glue is often our caree. And then our caree dies, and what kept us together is no longer there. And it can leave space in our relationships. You might feel like there's space around the holidays that are coming up. The holidays are different during a caregiving experience, and then they're different again after a caregiving experience. There's space at the table. There's space in your car. I remember the first time I drove without one of my parents to a holiday, and I was like, wow, I don't have passengers in my car. I don't have my parents. Wow. Yeah, Corey is sharing that she thinks she misses Henry more. And I think that that happens we have this idea that the missing should subside after a period of time. And I don't know. I don't know. There's always moments where we think, oh, if she or he were here right now, he or she would just love this. So we are reminded that the presence is gone regularly. Oh, I love this, Corey. So I think I miss Henry Moore. That's your first 6-word story. And then you turned it around to, I'm grateful for my many friends. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. I love that you connected to the gratitude. Yeah. So Trudy is writing one of her stories, and her first one is, my faith was challenged during caregiving. And her second story is, my faith strengthened because of caregiving. I love that. Oh, I will share the PowerPoint in the archive so that you have this one-word prompt that you can turn to whenever you feel like I've got something to write because I'm feeling something, but I'm just not sure what it is. And then perhaps one of these words will connect you to what it could be, but it also might make you think, oh, it's not one of these words, but now I know what word it is. Okay, so Nadim, who's going to be presenting in just about 3 minutes, has shared his 6-word story, and we're going to he's got 7 words, but we are very generous, so we're going to call it 6 words. Okay. I had no hope for the future. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The future changes so much after our caregiving experience ends, and we're trying to figure out, what is that future? What could that future look like? Okay, so here we go. There's a few more. Oh. And then Nadim's second 6-word story is, I look forward to living now. Oh, okay. And then Jacqueline is sharing, time makes me uneasy. Oh, wow. Really worried of the wasted time. Conscious of the time we really have. How to maximize the time available. How to make the most of time. The most of time have value. Decided to enjoy the time now. Right. See, that's what I think is kind of powerful about this, because we are missing something in our first word story, right? We're empty of something. Time, our carries, our faith, and then we can turn it with a second 6-word story into, okay, I miss this, so I'm going to connect to this right now. Oh, okay. I love to do this exercise. So thank you guys for joining me and doing it. And if you have more, you can add them to the archive that we add next week, because I'd love for you to continue to write and to continue to share what you're writing, because they are powerful, because what you're sharing is true for you. And oftentimes it's true for us too. And you empower yourself and us when you write about it. Okay, so we're going to get Nadim up here on the stage, so to speak. So Nadim, I think that you are a co-host, so you can share your screen. I can't remember if you said you wanted to do a PowerPoint or, oh, he's not going to do a PowerPoint. All right. Okay, so our next presenter is Nadim. If you watched his little promo podcast that we did, earlier this month, you'll recognize the power of his story. He cared for his mom, and his mom died when he was 16.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And he's going to talk about how he leveraged faith to manage grief. And that's the message that he's going to share with us today. So, Nadim, welcome.
Thank you so much, Denise. You're a tough act to follow, so I'm glad that you already gotten everybody started with the writing piece because I believe that that piece is so critical to overcoming grief. And no surprise is what I'm going to be doing today. I'll be walking you guys through a different writing exercise, but I'll get into that in a second. Yes, yes. So I'll start off with this. I don't know where we would be if you didn't have your stuff together. These words dictated every action in my life for 7 years. When I woke up on October 21st, 2014, at 7:27 a.m. to a world that I would have never imagined. As Denise already mentioned, hey everybody, my name is Nadim Sammur. I'll be walking you guys through a Leveraging Faith to Overcome Grief workshop today. I'm really, really excited to be doing this workshop with you guys. And so before we get started, I know you guys already have your pen and your paper, so I don't need to go over that. But I do want to give a disclaimer. I want this to be an interactive session. I want you guys to feel free to come off of mute and engage with me. As much as I love my voice is not the only one that I want to hear during this session. So I want to hear from all you guys as well. And the three objectives that we are going to cover today in today's session are: what does it mean to leverage faith to overcome grief? And also to provide tools in your tool belt that you can utilize to help overcome grief as it comes up in your life. And then three, the attitude that you need to have or how you need to view these experiences that you go through moving forward. So we'll start off with the first point, leveraging faith to overcome grief. One of the things I realized when those words, even though they may not mean anything when you guys hear them, but for me, those are the last words that my mom spoke to me the night before she had passed away. And so at every single point in my life after she died, I woke up, I went to school that day with those words in mind. I had to go study for take two of my hardest tests and my hardest classes, and continue to excel in school. Ended up going to college, excelling in sports, excelling at college, graduating, getting a job and things of that nature. But it wasn't until 7 years later when I finally hit a point where I didn't have everything together, where everything kind of came crashing down. And that's when the healing process started to begin. But what sparked me to, and what I want to encourage you all about the leveraging faith to overcome grief, is we underestimate the power that our minds have over our life. At that point, I made a decision that I was going to heal. And I think oftentimes in our life, when we think we make decisions, we think we're actually making choices. If we look at the word decision, it's composed of two parts, day, incision. We think about incision, it means to cut into something. We put day in front of something, it means out or cut off. So a decision means you're literally cutting off all other choices and all other options. I made the decision that this is the only path that I could go down, was to heal. And once I made that decision in my mind and I started to put action behind it, I then got the healing that I desired and what I desperately needed to then in turn take all those experiences that I went through, all that trauma and grief, not just from losing my mother, but my dad, my grandfather, my god sister, all at an early age, but all those different traumatic experiences to then be able to utilize them for my benefit and no longer let them hold me back from living the life or letting the light shine through me. So what I want to walk with you all through today, now we talked about leveraging faith to overcome grief, and to keep in mind on your faith healing journey, it's about making a decision and then taking action behind it. Once you do those two things and you cut off all their possibilities, I promise you the life that you are going to lead after you gain the healing is going to be better than what you could have ever possibly imagined. As I mentioned, it was October 21st, 2014. And 10 years ago, literally this week, was when I lost my mother. And we celebrated. There was no tears. There was no feeling of sorrow. It was all joy. It was a joyous celebration because I finally got the healing that I needed. And I no longer look at that as trauma, but as a blessing in disguise. I wouldn't be here speaking to you all today if I hadn't gone through that experience. I go speak at events like this nationwide. I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't gone through this. We get these little gifts in our life, these little experiences that we look at as negative and traumatic. But oftentimes we're given them to make a choice with it. Are we going to let it deteriorate our lives? Or are we going to let it accelerate our lives upwards? And that's a decision that we have to make. And so I want to encourage you all today to make the decision to let this, whatever grief it is that you are personally going through, to accelerate your life and not decelerate it. So I want to walk you guys through an exercise that I utilize to help with my healing journey. And I got it from this book right here. I don't know if you guys can see it. I am not in any way affiliated with the authors, or nor did I write this book, but it was an extremely helpful book when I was going through my journey. It's called The Grief Recovery Handbook. Yes, thank you, Denise, for putting in the chat the 20th anniversary expanded edition. And it's the action program for moving beyond death, divorce, and other losses, including health, career, and faith. And so I went through a bunch of the different I went through the main exercises of this book for a bunch of different relationships in my life. But since I'm talking about my mom today, I'll focus on that. So do we have our pen and our paper ready? Because we're going to move on to our second point about the tools that we can add to our tool belt. So the first tool that we can add to our tool belt is the loss history graph. And so what the loss history graph is a timeline. So on your paper, I just want you to take a straight line and turn your paper sideways like this, and draw a straight line across the middle of it. As you're drawing your straight line across the middle, I want you to think of a particular person in your life. Maybe the person that you were caregiving for, or maybe it was your company that you left. Maybe it was dealing with sports. You know, oftentimes there's grief when you can no longer play a sport anymore. Or it could be a significant impact in your life. For me, I wrote it for about my mom. And so on your timeline, now that you've drawn it out, I want you to think, now that you have this person or this company or this entity in mind, I want you to start with the first year that that relationship began. So for me, on my timeline history graph, the first year I have is 1998, the year I was born, because that's when my mother and I's relationship began. And then I want you to end it at present day. At the very end of your graph, put a line for 2024. Now, in between the time that that relationship started, and obviously, you know, we are limited on time today, so we can't think of every single instance, but the first instances or significant moments that pop in your mind, I want you to put them on a timeline on the year that they occurred. Now, there's two ways that you can do it, and I don't know if you got, well, I'll just explain it rather than try to demonstrate it. So if you draw, so say for instance, the first incident, I would put my mother. My mother died in 2014. I drew that as a line, a straight line below the horizontal line. So there's these lines you can go down or you can go up across, if that makes sense. And so if you're going down, that means it was a negative effect. And the longer that line is, the magnitude of that feeling it was. So for me, my mother passing was the longest line underneath the horizontal line, because that was a very traumatic negative experience for me. But there's also positive experiences that you can have as well along the way. And you would draw those above the line. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. I want to make sure that was clear. So go ahead and take a couple of minutes to really critically think about those, just a few key events. If you can give me just three. And I want, the whole goal is to just give you guys an outline and a bone structure to work with, to then go and utilize this later for either finishing out this relationship or other relationships in your life. And as you guys are filling it out, I'll share with you some of the things that I include on my mom's timeline graph. Now, my mom passed in 2014. I told you guys right out to present day. The relationship often doesn't end when we pass away. Oftentimes, there's still events that happen afterward that still leave an impact on us, because it makes you think about that person, as Denise had mentioned earlier. So in 2014, I had my mom die, but then in 2015, I put move in with relatives as a negative thing below the line, because I was minor, so I had to go live with somebody. And it wasn't the best situation. Obviously, I was cared for and all those great things, but it was a totally different structure than what I had with my mom. And it wasn't something I really fit well into. And so that was a really negative point for me. Also in 2016, I put underneath the line, you know, that also made me think about my mother, my Uncle Daryl. My Uncle Daryl and my mom were best friends. And after my mom had passed, he'd actually stepped up to be a guardian for me. And so he had passed away in 2016 due to cancer. And that was, you know, a huge turning point in my life as well, that I drew on the timeline, because I was thinking about my mom in that time space as well. Then obviously in 2016, I also graduated high school and went to college. That was below the line because I always thought my mom would be there to, you know, help see me off or be there for graduation and things of that nature. And then even too, after, afterward, my grandmother passes away in 2018. I graduated college in 2020, and I put that below the line because I always thought my mom would be there for college graduation. And then also other life changes as well, like moving, starting my first job, and even my father passing away. So I include all these different things on the timeline graph, even though they happened afterward, after my mother had passed. But even before then too, there were some certain things that we experienced that automatically like make a trigger for me as far as like just thinking about how my mom showed up for me in those situations. So, changing schools, transition from going as for changing schools, my grandfather passing away, and then my grandma starting to get Alzheimer's. So like those are some experiences that happened before, and then us moving to Texas after we've lived in Ohio our whole lives. Some experiences that I include on the timeline from before that I think of when I think of my mom, that as far as like significant events in our life history and life journey. Now that I've shared a little bit about my timeline, I'm curious if anybody started on the timeline, if there's anything that they feel like they would like to share with the broader group or any insights that you may have gained from just doing a quick draft on the timeline. Okay, Denise is saying my graph is for my dad who died in 2023. He was a tough guy. I decided to focus on the positive and had just a positive thought that was so comforting. Wonderful. And I'm curious, Denise, what was the positive thought that was so comforting? Was it just focusing on a positive?
It was actually a moment in 2012 when I was really struggling with something. And my dad, I said, "Oh gosh, Dad, I'm really having a hard time." And he just gave me this huge hug and just completely supported me. That was not necessarily who my dad was, except he was that in that moment. And that is a really nice memory for me to keep. And I'm glad I have that because I do think we have a tendency to remember the tough times. I don't know why that is, but yeah, I'm glad I have that. And that's all I actually have on the graph right now because that's really what I want to keep. I
Yeah,
might add a few more positives, but that's the one I think, wow,
that you want to keep
wow,
100%.
yeah,
And
yeah.
two, I even had one too. I remember my mom had congestive heart failure. So there was days where she couldn't even walk a couple of steps without struggling. Remember one day I was really feeling down about the move and how I was adjusting. And my room was on the second floor, her room was on the first floor. And it wasn't any light amount of stairs to go up. I remember she came all the way up the stairs to my room and just sat there and hugged me, assured me things of that nature. And this was like right before she had passed too. And so that was like one of the positive moments too that I remember very vividly. It's like, she struggled like that just to help me feel better. Right. So, holding on to those positive memories is just so important, because I truly believe that relationships, no matter how great they were, there's always positive and negatives, or how negative they were, there's some positives to be gained about it. And we're going to kind of touch on that in a second. I'm curious if anybody else have any other insights that they'd like to share. Okay.
Can I just mention one thing? So what's
Yeah.
interesting about your mom climbing those steps to come comfort you, to me, that is like what still happens today. Like your mom meets you wherever you are to
Yes.
provide comfort. Yeah. And
You're absolutely right.
yeah. And that's what I was thinking about with my dad. My dad comes to comfort me wherever I am. He's always there ready to hug and support me.
Yes,
Yeah.
the energy can never be created or destroyed. So that same you're absolutely right. No matter whether they're here or not, they're still here to comfort us in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just a memory or whatever it may be, just seeing something that reminds you of them. Yes. Well, if nobody else would like to share any insights, then we can go ahead and go on to the next part of the activity, which is after you create your loss history graph, and obviously the goal is to help build this up more in depth. The third thing, or the second thing of the second component of this exercise is to write a completion letter. So what Denise was writing about, sometimes you can express things out better with writing than you can verbally speaking them. And oftentimes when we're on our healing journey, we need some level of forgiveness. And that forgiveness is something that we may not be able to get from somebody who's passed away. Or even if they're living, they still might not be in a space to apologize for what they did or even realize what they did to get the forgiveness that you need. And it's important that we take responsibility into our own hands to get the forgiveness and the healing that we need, because we may not get it from these other people. And so the whole goal of this completion letter is to help you get the closure, the forgiveness, whatever it is, the healing that you need in order to move from the relationship. Now, the completion letter it's pretty much pretty open as far as how you want the details to be, but there's a couple key guidelines in place to make sure that's effective. And so the first thing that you need is the first thing that you do when you start off your completion letter is saying, "Dear so-and-so, I've been reviewing our relationship and have discovered some things I want to say." This is how you'll start off your completion letter. Now there's 4 different I statements that you're going to include in your completion letter. And again, feel free to vary them how you would like. But you want to have I apologize statements. You want to start off with, so in my instance, Mom, I apologize for blank. Mom, I want you to know blank. Let's see what the other one is. Mom, I want you to know I apologize. Mom, I forgive you for. I want you to keep those 3 statements in mind. I apologize. I want you to know I forgive. And as you're building out your letter, just keep those 3 statements in mind and just think about different areas in your life where this person, what you want them to know, what you apologize for your responsibility in your relationship, things that you may have wanted to say that you didn't get to say, what you forgive them for. And again, to Denise's point, we often focus on either the positive or we often focus on the negative on the side of the relationship. There's also some positives as well. Or on the flip side, we may look at a relationship in such a positive light. Like, I didn't really think of too much negative, right, that I could say about my mom and I's relationship. But after going through this exercise, I realized, okay, it's important that we get a holistic picture of the relationship. We can't just look at it one side, because then we're not going to really get the true healing that we absolutely need. So it's important that we look at it from a holistic perspective, both the positive and the negatives. Once you have those 3 statements all written out, and again, like, as you can see here, my completion letter from my mom is like 3 pages long. So, there's no necessarily length. It doesn't have to be just 3 statements. You don't have to keep it to 1 page. Say everything that you need to say and leave it all on the table. And when you've done all that, you want to end it with just a quick closing note. Whatever it is that you want to say. So for me, I said, Mom, I miss you. I love you to the moon and back. But it's important that you end it with goodbye, so-and-so. So goodbye, Mom. Signifying that this is a definitive closure to the relationship. And again, you can come back and revise this later. So for me at this time, I did this in 2021. There's been some events since that made me think about my mom, right? Like her 10-year anniversary that just happened this week, or I got married earlier this year that, she wasn't able to attend. So things of that nature, right? Want to include that. You can always come back and redo it later if you feel like there's still some more that you need to gain. But the importance is that you're taking ownership of your forgiveness and your healing journey, and you are getting the closure that you need in order to be able to seal this relationship off. Obviously, you're going to keep some of it with you as you move forward, but it no longer has a hold or it defines you. You've said everything that you needed to say. You've laid it all out on the table. And it's important that you read it out loud once it's done too, as like signifies like, I'm releasing this, right? It's done. So the goal is not only to write the letter, but it's also to say it out loud. And once you have done this and really looked at your life and all the traumatic experiences that you've gone to and repeat this exercise, I promise you will get the healing that you need. And that leads us to the 3rd point, how we need to have the viewpoint on these experiences looking forward. And I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. These experiences, no matter how negative or traumatic they can be, they are a gift. They are truly a gift. And that's how we have to look at them, because they have an opportunity to totally transform and change our lives, not only for ourselves, but for other people as well. Again, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, and I hope, anybody that's listening to this live or watching the recording, I hope that this changes your life as well, right? I would have never been able to be in a position to speak to you all today if I hadn't gone through it, but then 2, made a decision that I was going to heal from it and let it make me better, not bitter. There's so much life left to live on the other side of caregiving and the other side of loss. I always tell people we're guaranteed 3 things in life. Everybody says that death and taxes are the only 2 things, but we're also guaranteed grief. Everybody goes through it. Nobody knows really how to have the proper tools or the resources to go out and get the healing that they need for it. So I encourage you all, if you find these exercises useful, if you decide to read the book and you find it useful, share with somebody that's going through it. Because we really, even though it's something we all experience, it's something that we all know so little about. How to use it, what it is, how to recover from it, what it truly can be in our lives. And so I just encourage you all today to enjoy life and the journey. My mother, she actually used to write a Christmas letter every year. And so there's a quote in it. And when I was reading, I was kind of going through my notes in preparation for this workshop. I wanted to give you all today. And she always left a holiday message to everybody that was reading it. It says, enjoy God's blessings and know that happiness is a journey, not a destination. Cherish the gifts and remember it's how we handle the detours that make all the difference in this incredible journey we call life. Thank you all so much for allowing me to share this time and space with you all.
Okay, so there was something about the letter and the closure of the letter that made me think, you know what, we close, I guess maybe our our perspective
Yes,
about what was through that letter in order to embrace what is.
100%. You hit the nail on the head.
Okay, because what's so interesting is that letter holds, I guess, maybe some judgments that we've held against ourselves, against others. And so that judgment clouds our ability to move forward. So we release that and then we just embrace that we are all just having a human experience. And because of that, it's all okay.
Yes, yes, it is all okay.
It is all okay. That's so interesting. Because when you were saying you close it with a goodbye, I thought, oh my gosh, what if we're not ready to close it with a goodbye? And it just made me realize we're closing just that perspective. So we embrace
What
the
is,
what is. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We embrace the energy that they are part of. I love that you reminded us that energy is permanent, right? We can't lose energy. Energy is permanent. So I really do believe that there's the energy around us from the people that have died before. And all we're doing is taking care of that energy by releasing the judgment around what was.
100%, 100%. And also too, they live like nobody really has the ability to truly die if you are continuing to carry out who they were, the lessons that they taught you, the impact that they had on your life. If you're ex putting that out into the world, right? The person continues to have an impact on other people, even if they're not here. And that can be both good and bad. So
Right.
again, it's up to us to make the choice to use it for the benefit rather than a detriment.
Right. Yeah. So the first time you wrote the letter to your mom was in what year?
2021.
2021. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm curious what happened then after you wrote the letter?
Oh, wow, that is a wonderful question, Denise. Well, one of the reasons that sparked me to go to therapy was because I had all these significant losses early on in my life was with my mother. Shortly before that, before I wrote these letters and went to therapy, my father, my uncle, grandfather, grandmother, all these different people, right? I realized that it was preventing me from getting super close to people because I'm like, if you get too close, you're gonna die as well. And I was in a relationship with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, I'm not ready. I don't think I'm ready for taking this relationship to the next level, mainly because of fear of loss, another loss, right? It's like if I open my heart too much and I truly, let you in, you could die as well, right? And I was scared of that. And so what happened after doing, and I did completion later. I have a whole stack of them right here for different areas of in relationships in my life. But once I completed those, my heart opened up, and it's almost like I had a brand new heart that I hadn't felt in years. And not only was I able to give love in a way that I'd never been able to give it, well, in a while, but also receive it too. And that encouraged me to be, hey, thank you for joining. It encouraged me to take the next step in our relationship. It also encouraged me to just deepen existing relationships I have with family and friends. So it literally, and I tell people all the time, ever since I went through that healing journey, it felt like my wife and I have just started dating ever since, right? That's how strong the love and the bond is felt. And I don't think I'd ever experienced that if I wouldn't have healed. And then also being that fear of loss, because, as I outlined in the book, loss and grief is inevitable. We all experience it. Just because I experienced it now doesn't mean I'm not going to experience it again. Would I rather have given my all, right? And being able to be comforted in that whenever that loss does come? Or am I going to have the regret saying, I really wish I would have opened my heart up more to this person, but I was too scared to, right? For something that's going to happen anyway.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I mean, it all went out for me. Okay. So, Nadim, thank you so much for being here today. Can you share your contact information in the chat room for those who've joined us live? And then those who are watching the archive, I'll make sure to include your contact information in our show notes. That was really, thank you for that. That was really powerful. And thank you for that
Cool.
nice memory of my dad. I'm going to keep that one. Yeah. He was a tough guy. And he was also a softie, and that's what you reminded me. And I love the reminder that there's good and bad, that we
Yeah.
want to show up fully as our who we are as humans, and that's good and bad. Yeah. Okay. All right, Nadim, thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, this is great. We're going to take a 5-minute break. So feel free to run to the restroom, get another glass of water, and then we'll come back. And Alicia's here, and she's going to kick us off with some conversations around peace of mind with our money. Doesn't that sound nice? Sounds like we all need it. Okay, so I'll see you back here in 5 minutes.